Hello everyone, how's it going? It is Tyrnor, as always, and I wanted to bring you a bit of a different video from what I usually do. I'm bringing you my opinion and a very in-depth analysis on Sylvanas and her character and the latest developments of her character and so on and so forth, especially because she is now the, spoilers, war chief of the Horde and all the arguments that have gone from there. Now, as a bit of a sort of thing that I'm going to say before we start, I'm not a Sylvanas hater, but I'm not a Sylvanas lover either. I want to bring a more neutral standpoint to the whole controversy regarding Sylvanas, and you are of course free to disagree with me. For this video, I wanted mostly to take a chronological look at Sylvanas. I will look at her entire history as a character, what I think of certain moments, how they influence her overall character for better or worse, and probably come up with a conclusion at the end. Sound good? Okay. Sylvanas' first appearance chronologically in the history of Azeroth was in the Second War in the Tides of Darkness novel, which was the novelization for Warcraft 2. Her role is pretty minor and not very significant. She, along with Lor'themar, Illyria and Turalyon, organized the defenses of Quel'Thalas against the Horde, which is pretty straightforward, not much I can comment here. Like her sisters, Sylvanas was a ranger. Apparently she was the best out of the three of them, and she became the Ranger General of Silvermoon. Again, this is not a very significant moment for her character. In the novel itself, is just sort of used to cement her relationship with her sisters and with Lor'themar. The other significant moment for her character before the Third War was that she, at one point, insisted on training the human Sylvanas Aftermath as a ranger, and faced a lot of political opposition because of that. Namely, she was opposed by her subordinates, Lor'themar and Haldoran among others, and by Prince Kael'thas, the son of King Anastarion. Sylvanas, however, insisted that Nathanos would be a good choice, and she was apparently proven right, as Nathanos proved to be an exceptional ranger before his death. I personally like Nathanos Maris, or Nathanos Blightcaller as he was later known. As a character, I like him. He is mean, he is snarky, and he is utterly devoted to Sylvanas. Now, some have speculated that this is a romantic devotion. I personally don't think that there's a romantic connection between the two, at least I don't think that there is one that is reciprocated by Sylvanas. I think Nathanos' devotion stems from the fact that Sylvanas was the only one to support him when he was training to become a ranger, and she was the one who personally freed him from the Scourge later on and made him her champion. I don't think Sylvanas supported him because she fancied him or anything. Although it wouldn't be a surprise to see her fancy a human considering the family she is in. But rather she supported him because he was a very capable ranger, like he later proved to be. As it stands, her support of Nathanos is one of the few character moments that she has prior to her death, and it sort of illustrates in a way that she's not the typical racist elf, so to say, and that she doesn't blindly follow orders as she opposed Prince Kael'thas on this matter. So a good, albeit minor character moment in my book. Although the moment is so minor for her that it's never told from her perspective, we find it out either from Nathanos' or Lor'themar's perspectives, and as part of their respective characters. So yeah, moving on. The next moment for her chronologically was her defense of Quel'Thalas against the Scourge. In Warcraft 3, this is done fairly well from a storytelling standpoint, as she is portrayed as a fairly cunning adversary who knows she cannot stand against the Scourge alone, so she employs more or less guerrilla tactics, although it is debatable how much she realized that fact, since she placed her entire confidence that Quel'Thalas would hold because the Elf Gates would hold. In the novelization, however, I would say her defense of Quel'Thalas is, very stupid. She assembles most of her army at the entrance of the kingdom, ready to ambush and kill Arthas. Only she decides that she doesn't want to be remembered for killing her enemy in an ambush, she wants to face him head on. So she announces her presence to Arthas and challenges him verbally, pretty much squandering any advantage her forces had. In the novel, she then employs tactics which prove to be extremely ineffective against the Scourge, resulting in about half of Quel'Thalas' ranger force being destroyed before the first battle is even over. I have to say that this conflict for the first Elfgate, is probably one of the most face-palming bits of Warcraft lore I've ever read. In Sylvanas' defense, this was a previously unknown enemy, so she probably couldn't have known that her tactics wouldn't work. On the other hand, since she was facing an unknown enemy, why did she squander the element of surprise? Her pride got ahead of her, and because of that she lost half her army, filling the ranks of the Scourge in the process. Moving on in the game, she tries to send runners to Silvermoon, which are usually ambushed by the Scourge, who then destroy her base, kill her, and turn her into a banshee. In the novel, after the defeat at the first Elfgate, she flees with her remaining forces north and orders the evacuation of several villages. She sends runners to Silvermoon yet again, which are also ambushed and killed. Only instead of retreating to the city and assisting in its defense, she retreats west with her army to Windrunner Spire to make her last stand there because. Then, as we know, she fights and is killed by Arthas, who raises her to be the first Banshee of the Scourge. She is then used in battle against her people. In the novelization, actually, her Banshee screams severely undermine the High Elf defense at several points. What frustrates me regarding the novelization is that Sylvanas is not portrayed as a dumb character. She's portrayed as being pretty smart, and yet she makes all these moronic decisions, probably because the author had to transform the geography and storyline of Warcraft 3 to the actual in-game World of Warcraft layout of Quel'Thalas in regards to geography. But I digress. So Sylvanas utterly failed in her defense of her people because of her pride and or because she didn't understand her enemy, despite the reports she received from Lor'themar. Skipping forward in time a lot to when she was named Warchief, one of the arguments people made in her favor of being named Warchief was her tactical and strategic expertise, which would be important in the fight against the Legion. Her disastrous defense of Quel'Thalas makes me really question that idea. Sure, she won hard-fought victories after that, but this is one big boo-boo and probably the biggest failure of her life, or unlife, whatever. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So, Sylvanas fails to protect her people, is turned into a Banshee, an event which sparks her undying hatred for Arthas and the Scourge. Regardless of what I said and think about her defense of Quel'Thalas, I think that this is one of the best character traits of Sylvanas, her single-minded quest for vengeance against the Lich King. Even if at least part of her failure could be attributed to Sylvanas herself, we understand why she would hate Arthas so much, and we empathize with her, especially considering what Arthas made her do and how he forced her to fight and intimidate her people. Her next moments are fairly minor. While in the service of the Scourge, she sometimes has this back and forth duel of words with Arthas, which was kind of interesting to read in the novelizations. For instance, when she senses Arthas' hesitation to attack Dar'khan, she mocks him for his fond memories regarding a special someone. Not necessarily character-defining moments here, but good to read nonetheless. When Ner'zhul, the Lich King, begins to weaken, she, along with other undead, of course, regain their free will. The next moment for Sylvanas is her alliance with the three Dreadlords, Varimathras, Deferok, and Balnazar, and her ambush of Arthas. Regarding the latter, it is once again an instance where Sylvanas lets her pride get ahead of her. She successfully paralyzes Arthas, but instead of delivering the killing blow, she wants to torture him. This allows Kael'thas to arrive and rescue Arthas, forcing Sylvanas to flee. Now, this is a character flaw of Sylvanas. She almost never acknowledges when she's wrong and often doesn't really try to learn from her mistakes, as seen here. Again, when she lets her pride get in her way, again, and does not even realize that she is to blame for her failure. Regarding the Dreadlords, it's debatable how much Sylvanas knew about them. About the Dreadlords as a species, so to say. In Warcraft 3, she was seen talking with Kael'thas about them, and she was left in Lor'themar during the battle for Mount Hyjal, so she had at least some knowledge regarding these three, or the Dreadlords as a whole. She had enough knowledge to turn Varimathras against his brothers, gambling successfully that he would be more concerned with saving his own hide. But throughout her reign she came to trust him too much, forgetting that he is, after all, a demon and a Dreadlord at that. While it would have been, and it was, cool for the Horde to have a Dreadlord on their side, the signs that Varimathras was betraying Sylvanas were apparent since vanilla, arguably even before that with the now non-canon RPG books. But despite all this stuff, which seemed somewhat obvious to us the players, Sylvanas never realized that Varimathras was plotting against her. So either she was completely underestimating him, or Varimathras was a lot more cunning than he seemed. I'm honestly not entirely sure which is the case, as Varimathras was indeed very careful with his betrayal. But at the same time, Sylvanas should have remembered that her main advisor was also a Dreadlord. So, Sylvanas secures the aid of Varimathras and defeats his Dreadlord brothers, gaining control of Tirisfal Glades and the capital city of Lor'themar. I did like the method by which he accomplished this, namely blackmailing Varimathras and enslaving an ogre tribe, a Murloc clan, some local gnolls and a band of bandits. However, one interesting thing to note was that she had the option of also enslaving a forest troll tribe, but she refused, opting to slaughter them instead. The reason she refused to do so was pretty much pure racism against the trolls. Not unjustified, mind you, as the trolls and the elves were enemies for millennia, but it does serve to remind us of two things. One, Sylvanas was too prideful to have trolls in her army, and two, Sylvanas still had, at this point in time, attachments to her original High Elf background. So her refusal to recruit forest trolls, while very subtle, is indeed an interesting, good character developing moment, at least in my opinion. The other aspect of this campaign is her manipulation of Grand Marshal Garithos. There isn't really much to say. He was in her way, he was useful in conquering capital city. His death shows how heartless, so to say, Sylvanas has become in regards to the living, but it's not very important, all things considered. Pretty much all the undead hate the living for one reason or another, and Sylvanas is not very special in that regard, except when it comes to her relationship with the other elves. Her attachment to her former people is pointed out in the next moment, which is the Sunwell Trilogy, where she visits Quel'Thalas and helps fight Dar'khan Drafir. Other than that, before Wrath of the Lich King, Sylvanas' efforts focused on securing her position and the Forsaken in Lor'themar, and on preparing her vengeance against the Lich King. This is why she joined the Horde, and this is why she began the development of the Plague. The Plague was meant to be used against the Lich King first and foremost. It is, I suppose, another example of Sylvanas' penchant for, poetic justice, I suppose you could call it, along with her aforementioned ambush of Arthas as another example. At this point, her people, the Forsaken, are just, to quote, arrows in her quiver, tools, in her opinion. Her main focus is her vengeance on the Lich King, and she views the Forsaken as merely means to an end, not as her kin, so to say, although What is interesting is her relationship with the new Blood Elf Nation. She feels connected with them in a way. She sent Forsaken forces to assist the Blood Elves in reclaiming the Ghostlands, and has actively campaigned for them to become part of the Horde. Though I don't think she did it out of selfless devotion, so to say. At this point, I would say that her obsession with defeating the Lich King is a bigger priority for her than her former people's welfare. However, she still feels connected to them, obviously. I think that her assisting them and her campaigning for them to join the Horde was done mostly because of a sort of internal fear that she did not want to fight her people again, in case they were to join the Alliance, for instance. Sorry. I think she did it to have a sort of peace of mind that she was helping her people and that they were fighting on the same side. And I don't think that she much cared for the actual prosperity of Quel'Thalas. And indeed, she might have just helped the Blood Elves just to gain another tool in her arsenal. This is illustrated in Lor'themar short story, which takes place just before the start of Wrath of the Lich King. In it, she arrives in Silvermoon and basically blackmails Lor'themar into aiding her Northrend campaign, or else she would withdraw her support of the Blood Elf forces in the Ghostlands. It is pretty obvious that she views her quest for vengeance above any perceived loyalty she would have over her former people, no matter how she tries to justify it. At the end of the meeting, Lor'themar also says goodbye in the Thalassian language, the language of the High and Blood Elves, which makes Sylvanas very uncomfortable, and she leaves without a word. So she obviously does not really view herself as one of them, so to say, another Blood Elf. Her role in Wrath of the Lich King is pretty straightforward. She personally arrived in Northrend after the battle for the Undercity to participate in the fight against the Lich King, and her whole character arc is that she is incredibly driven to defeat Arthas, which again makes complete sense and I have no problems with. The other part of her Wrath of the Lich King storyline is the Wrathgate and the battle for the Undercity. I've pretty much covered it before when I talked about Vermithras and the Dreadlords. In retrospect, but perhaps this is why she did not immediately set off for Northrend to participate in the campaign against Arthas. Maybe she sensed that if she were away, some political enemy within Undercity would attempt to oppose her. This is just pure speculation on my part. This also marks pretty much one of her first interactions with Vol'jin, since they fought side by side for the Undercity. More on that later. The only other point I'd like to mention regarding Undercity is that, again, she did not succeed in stopping Vermithras and Putris from betraying her. She did not see it coming, despite the fact that she had, again, a Dreadlord as her main advisor, and her only thought during the battle is to punish the traitors, not exactly seeing how she is partly to blame for all this. The next part of her story is the aftermath of the Lich King's death, where she tries to kill herself. There's three things to discuss here. Firstly, her motivation for trying to kill herself. She does so because when she was actually dying while she was being killed by Arthas, she saw the afterlife as this sort of wonderful thing where she would be granted rest, a rest which Arthas stole from her. And I would like to mention that this point was also present in the Arthas Rise of the Lich King novel. It wasn't something like an ask pull for this particular short story in which she kills herself. The other reason was that she fulfilled her purpose. She helped kill Arthas finally, and she didn't really have anything left to live for. This part I understand and I agree with it, so to say. It is a logical end to her character. Keep in mind that I said a logical end and not necessarily the logical end. Secondly, the Val'kyr. I personally find the connection they said existed between them and Sylvanas to be dubious at best. I also found issue with the fact that the Val'kyr can pretty much do whatever now that Bolvar is the Lich King. Although I admit that the later details and explanations we got about Val'kyr lore, especially in Legion, have softened the blow, so to say, so I kind of understand this better. Though I still have some issue with the aforementioned connection between Sylvanas and the Val'kyr. The third point was that she was brought back after her suicide. I'll be honest, I think they did not let her die because they did not want another Horde leader to die. We had Cairn die, and we had Magni Bronzebeard being petrified. If Sylvanas were to die, then they might have had to kill another Alliance leader, which I don't think that they were prepared to do. As to being brought back, I think it makes sense from a story perspective, especially with what we learn later on in Chronicle regarding the afterlife in World of Warcraft. It is a shift for her character, but I don't think it's necessarily a major shift. She went from an obsessive quest to defeat the Lich King to an obsessive quest to stay alive. Even if her rhetoric changes regarding her people, the Forsaken, it changes from being regarded as arrows in a quiver to a bulwark against the infinite, to quote. She still views them as tools. Only now, she doesn't have a set goal in mind, as in killing the Lich King, but rather she has a more vague goal which she views can be best accomplished by strengthening her people, her defenses. She does appear to care more for her people now, but only because they are her main tools, not her best chance for survival really. And this is pretty much her main role in Cataclysm and throughout Mists of Pandaria. She is strengthening the Forsaken and trying to take advantage of the Horde to do so. I don't think she views herself as part of the Horde, but rather she views the Horde as a means to an end, with the added benefit that her former people, the Elves, are in the Horde as well. But again, I don't think she truly cares for the Elves either. She tries to gain the support of Lor'themar at various points, but I think she does not do so due to a genuine desire to reconnect with her people, but for two reasons. Firstly, she wants allies or tools, and secondly, she does not want to fight her own people again. There is one more thing to discuss regarding Sylvanas in Cataclysm, namely the criticism that she either keeps winning or is never defeated in her battles against the Alliance. This is a valid criticism, and I do agree that the Forsaken, while it makes sense for them to become the dominant power in Lordaeron, have become a little too powerful in my opinion. But I would also make this argument, which again you are free to criticize, the most important thing for Sylvanas is her life, her staying alive, not necessarily the accomplishments of the Forsaken. And she has lost several of her Val'kyr, her means of staying alive, throughout Cataclysm. Again, in the battle of Alliance versus Horde, the Horde is obviously the dominant party in Lordaeron, but in the battle of Alliance versus Sylvanas herself, I think the scales are a bit more even. Again, feel free to disagree. The next important moment for Sylvanas is in the War Crimes novel. Apologies. There she meets with Verisa, her sister, once again, and the two of them rekindle their bond and begin to collaborate in order to assassinate Garrosh Hellscream. Sylvanas' family is, I think, her last remaining real connection to this world, other than her fear of death, and it is utterly broken in this novel, as Verisa chooses to be with her twin sons rather than join Sylvanas in Undercity. I did like that character moment for Sylvanas, as she vows to never love again, but I would like to see what happens in Legion when Illyria, her other sister, returns. And finally, we come to the elephant in the room. Sylvanas becomes War Chief. Do I like this development? No. I do not think that she should have been War Chief. I honestly think that they killed Vol'jin a bit ahead of his time. But regarding Sylvanas herself, like I mentioned before in this analysis, I do not think that she has any true bonds of loyalty to the Horde. In fact, I think now they will just be another tool in her arsenal. There's the argument that she would be the most military experienced among the candidates. Debatable. Like I said before, her defense of Quel'Thalas against the Scourge was laughable, I would say. However, I'm not going to judge her military career solely by that. Her tactics and her strategies did gain the Forsaken major wins in Lordaeron, so she is not utterly incompetent at the very least. Let's compare her to the other faction leaders. She's obviously better than Galliwix. She's probably better than Bane, or at least more experienced. It's debatable whether she's better than Lor'themar. However, I think she's not better than the current leader of the Orcs, namely Saurfang. I honestly think that Saurfang should have been the new war chief. He served as Orgrim Doomhammer's second-in-command, he was undefeated in all the battles he led before the end of the Second War, and he is without a doubt far more loyal to the Horde and a far more trusted commander by the other Horde leaders than Sylvanas ever was. So in short, I do not like the idea that Sylvanas becomes the new war chief. However, there are two things that I would like to mention. In the cinematic, Vol'jin names Sylvanas because the spirits encourage him to do so. In addition, we see Sylvanas linger for a little while longer in the throne room, pondering, which I think is a hint that the developers are trying to say, look, Sylvanas really does care about the Horde. On paper, I don't think this is enough to justify War Chief Sylvanas. However, it does tell me that the story team at Blizzard do have something in mind for her. So I will wait and see. Maybe it will justify her ascension, or maybe it will make me rage quit the Horde and join the Alliance. I do not know, I will wait and see. So, to recap, what do I think of Sylvanas as a character? I think she's a very flawed person, she's far too prideful and very obsessive towards her goals, but she has many interesting sides and character traits, so I do not dislike her as a character, I actually like her somewhat. What do I think about the argument that the Alliance keeps losing against the Forsaken? It's not an unjustified complaint, and I agree in part. Though I would argue, like I said, that while the Forsaken and the Horde might be victorious, Sylvanas herself has suffered defeats. What do I think about her becoming War Chief? I do not like it, but I'm going to wait and see, at least for now. So I suppose this is the end of this particular opinionated look. I would like to hear your own opinions on Sylvanas and my analysis of her character. You are free to disagree with me or with each other, but I would urge you to be civilized and don't go insulting people. I've seen way too many arguments regarding Sylvanas devolve into personal insults. Other than that, I will see you all next time.